You trust the person who raises you. You trust the cousin who grew up down the road. You trust the boyfriend who shares your bed. In Tembisa, South Africa, an entire family trusted a police officer named Rosemary Ndlovu. That trust would cost 6 of them their lives. This is the story of a woman sworn to protect the public who turned her own bloodline into a business plan. This is the story of Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was born around 1978 in a village near Bushbuckridge in Mpumalanga province. She grew up like many young women in the area, moving to Johannesburg in search of better opportunities. She found stability. She joined the South African Police Service. She became a constable stationed at Tembisa South, a township northeast of Johannesburg. On paper, she was exactly what a community wants from an officer: reliable, present, armed with the authority of the badge. But underneath the uniform, according to later reporting, was a woman drowning in debt, reportedly pulled under by a gambling habit and pressure from lenders. And somewhere in that pressure, an idea took root. Not a plan to earn more, a plan to profit from death. It started in 2012. Ndlovu took out a life insurance policy on her cousin, witness Mandala Homo. Insurers rarely ask hard questions when a policy is opened. They ask questions when a claim is filed. So the policy went through quietly. Homo was an ordinary young man, the kind of relative who shows up at family gatherings without much fuss. He had no reason to suspect the cousin filling out paperwork on his life was doing anything more than looking out for him, the way insurance is supposed to work. Then Homo was found dead in Olifantsfontein, killed by blunt force trauma. Investigators at the time treated it as an isolated tragedy. A robbery gone wrong, perhaps. A random act of violence in an area that saw plenty of it. Nobody looked twice at the cousin who filed the claim. Ndlovu collected more than 130,000 rand from the payout. One relative, one policy, one death. It should have been where the story ended. It wasn't. The following year, Ndlovu's sister Audrey died. Court evidence would later show she had been poisoned and strangled, a killing that took time and required Ndlovu to be close enough to watch her sister suffer. Another policy, another payout. 2 family members dead in 2 years, and no one outside Ndlovu's own circle connected the dots. Why would they? She was police. She attended the funerals. She grieved publicly, convincingly, in a community that trusted its officers to explain the unexplainable. She was the one explaining it. Between 2012 and 2018, according to the evidence eventually presented in court, 4 more relatives would die. A niece, Zanel Mother, 2 nephews, Mayeni Mashaba and Brilliant Mashego, and her live-in boyfriend, Yingwani Mabasa, a man she shared a home with, stabbed dozens of times in an attack investigators would later tie back to her. Mabasa alone had 16 separate policies taken out in his name, worth more than 400,000 rand, with Ndlovu listed as the beneficiary on every single one. 16 policies on one man is not a profile of someone protecting a partner's future. It is the profile of someone counting down to a payout. 6 people, 1 woman collecting on all of them. Prosecutors would later calculate a total takeout at over 1.4 million rand, close to $95,000 cashed out policy by policy, funeral by funeral. 6 funerals, and all by all accounts, she was present and visibly grieving at every single one. What makes a case like this so difficult to catch isn't just the killer's composure. It is the ordinary machinery around her that made every individual death look explainable on its own. A death in the family is a tragedy. 2 is a terrible run of luck. It takes someone connecting years of scattered incidents across different dates and different causes of death before a pattern like this becomes visible. And for a long time, nobody was looking, because the person closest to every death was also the officer the system expected to trust. How does a serving police officer commit 6 murders inside her own family without her colleagues noticing? Partly, it is the nature of the crime. Deaths in low-income communities from violence, illness, or incidents are common enough that patterns can hide in plain sight, especially when the person filing the claims wears a badge herself. Partly, it is cover. According to later criminal profiling presented at her trial, Ndlovu was described as meticulous and manipulative, someone who could grieve on command and plan in silence. But patterns eventually surface. And in 2018, Ndlovu made the mistake that unravels almost every serial offender eventually. She got greedy for the wrong reasons, and she trusted the wrong person to help her. She began planning her most ambitious move yet, the murder of her own mother, Maria Mushwana, along with another sister, Joyce, and all 5 of Joyce's children. 7 more lives, 7 more payouts in a single operation. It was, by any measure, the boldest and most reckless plan she had attempted. Wiping out an entire branch of her family at once would have meant 7 simultaneous insurance claims landing on her desk within weeks of each other. Even by the standards of what she had already gotten away with, this was a plan built on assumption that no one would ever look closely enough to ask why. She needed a hitman for a job of that size, so she hired one. He said yes. Then he had a change of heart. Instead of carrying out the killing, the man went to police. Investigators set up a sting. Over a period of surveillance, they recorded Ndlovu discussing the planned murders in explicit detail, negotiating a price with the hitman, and later with undercover police posing as a second gunman, brought in to help finish the job. She laid out which family members to target first, how the deaths should look, and how quickly the claims could be filed afterward. Every word was captured. Every plan she had laid out to end 7 more lives was now evidence against her, recorded in her own voice. She was arrested in 2018 in an undercover sting operation in Bushbuck Ridge, the same rural region she had left years earlier, chasing a better life in the city. The woman who had once worn a badge to keep the peace was taken into custody by the same police service she had served for years in the province where her story had begun. The case that followed became one of the most closely watched criminal trials in recent South African history. Ndlovu stood accused of 6 murders, an attempted murder of her mother, sister, nieces and nephews, incitement to commit murder, and fraud tied to the insurance claims. The trial ran for roughly 3 months in the Gauteng High Court, sitting at Palm Ridge, and it dominated national headlines throughout. Prosecutors walked the court through years of policy documents, payout records, and phone evidence, building a timeline that connected 6 separate deaths to one recurring beneficiary. In November 2021, Judge Ramarumo Monama delivered the verdict, guilty on all 6 murder counts. At sentencing, the court had testimony from a criminal profiler who told the judge Ndlovu showed no remorse and no empathy for her victims, describing her as meticulous, manipulative, and a serial killer in the clinical sense of the term, not just a headline. The profiler warned that the woman capable of planning 6 family murders across 6 years while continuing to serve as a police officer was likely to remain a danger for the rest of her life. Judge Monama handed down 6 concurrent life sentences for the murders, along with the additional 30 years, 10 for fraud, 10 for incitement to commit murder, and 10 for the attempted murder of her own mother and surviving family members. He compared the case to South Africa's infamous 1932 Daisy de Malka poisonings, saying the country had not seen anything compared to the 89 years since. Her legal team asked for leave to appeal. The court denied it on the spot, calling the evidence against her overwhelming. You might expect the story to end there. It didn't. Years into her life sentence, further details continued to surface. Ndlovu was found to have been in illegal possession of cell phone while incarcerated. In May 2026, a Kempton Park court convicted her of a separate charge, incitement to commit murder. tied to a 2018 plot in which she allegedly connected a former colleague with a hitman to kill the colleague's husband. Again, for an insurance payout. The same method, the same motive, a different victim entirely, uncovered years after her original conviction. It was a reminder that Ndlovu, this wasn't one lapse in judgment. It was a system she had built and kept building for as long as she could get away with it. According to insurance industry officials who later spoke publicly about the case, Ndlovu's crimes exposed a much bigger vulnerability, a lack of information sharing between insurers that allowed the same person to be insured multiple times over by multiple companies without raising a flag. Officials have since pointed to cases like hers as evidence of a broader, quietly growing problem in the country, sometimes described as murder for insurance syndicates, exploiting the same gaps she did. So what do you take from a case like this? It is easy to file Rosemary Ndlovu away as a monster and move on. That's the comfortable version of the story. The one where a person like her is simply an aberration, unconnected to anything in ordinary life. But the harder truth is, she didn't need to hide from a system built to catch her. She used a badge that was supposed to protect a community to instead exploit its blind spots, filing claims, attending funerals, and grieving in public, while the people closest to her kept dying on schedule. 6 lives were reduced to line items on insurance forms, and the woman filing those forms was the one person everyone assumed they could trust. Not a stranger, not someone from outside the family. The person who was there at every birthday, every holiday, every moment a family turns to each other for safety. Cases like this tend to linger, not because the killer was clever, in some cinematic way, but because of how ordinary the surrounding system was. No dramatic cover-up, no elaborate disguise, just paperwork, patience, and quiet assumption that grief does not need to be investigated. You trust the person who raises you, you trust the cousin who grew up down the road, but trust on its own was never the thing keeping Rosemary Ndlovu's family alive. It was the only thing she needed them to keep giving her.